Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and friends. I am your resident psychic medium, Christy Godwin, and I'm here with my beautiful, phenomenal friend, Iris Libby. Thank you for being here, Iris.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone.
Now, Iris is an astrologer, a kick-ass psychic medium in her own right, but we are here to talk about something kind of outside of those realms. It's more on another path, a business that Iris and I are doing together. And it's about healing people. We all come into this world and travel a path that will have some kind of trauma with it. And the specific trauma we're talking about today is the impact it has on children who are not believed about abuse when they are kids and the impact it has on them when they are growing up as adults. A lot of times we feel like, oh, yeah, I'm good. We've tapped it down when truly we haven't processed it. So we're going to talk about some of the things we notice in people's behavior when they are adults and they had abuse when they were younger, but they were not believed. Now, Iris, can you help us understand some of that impact? Can you share how not being believed about child abuse impacts a survivor's ability to trust others and themselves later in life?
Okay. Well, like just trusting others, right? Because if you're abused as a child, there is an erosion of safety in relationships. So you don't know who to trust, who not to trust. There's also a major fear of rejection because if you have this abusive relationship, there's a lot of, push, pull, rejection, but also rejection in other relationships. Like you don't know really where you stand. There's a difficulty many times in building close relationships with people. And there's also there's a hyper vigilance, and it's the experience of being disbelieved, right?
Yes.
So it drains all relationships because you feel that you're not believed. Now, as far as trusting yourself, there's a lot of self doubt that children feel, a lot of shame and blame. You have an intuition that's undetermined. In other words, like you're feeling things and you know these things to be true, but they're not being verified by people around you. And also, there's a big difficulty in advocating for yourself. Now, that's not true with every child, but I know with a lot of children, that's very difficult. Um,
Yeah, I want to validate some of the things that was some great points. I want to validate some of what Iris said. She made some such beautiful points there. And how she put also, she said it's not true with everyone. I do want people to remember we're giving every person is an individual. So how their traumas, impacts them very specifically is going to be a little bit different. So thank you for bringing that up, Iris, how it isn't true for everyone. And what I have seen in my own practice is a lot of this self doubt. And we've just perpetuated it. I myself was not believed as a child through some of the things that had happened. And something that I need to explain myself to everyone. Like that is something I personally do. I can't just say, oh, I can't make it. I have to tell you exactly what I'm doing during that time, where I'm going to be, why I can't make it to your event, so you believe me. And also, I have a difficult time, and this is just how it has affected me personally, is speaking, like Ira said, advocating for myself because I won't be believed. Why would I speak up if I'm not going to be believed? So that is how it impacted me specifically. Iris, do you have a situation of how it affected you specifically?
It's interesting because I became the reverse. I became a big advocate. It's like as soon as I was able to, I became an advocate. And that's what I was saying is that it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
I believed I knew what I was saying was true. And so I just became a stronger, I want to say more forceful person. And I know some people will withdraw and other people won't. But I will say that it does have long-term effects on your relationships. And again, isn't for everyone. You feel isolated because you can't tell your secret. You tend to overcompensate, which is what you were talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
How, you have to tell people. I do the same thing. I have to tell you exactly what I'm doing.
I do.
There's a pattern of attracting people who repeat that harm. And so when you look at it, you've got to look at all of those things. And for me, with my abuse, I became hyper vigilant. Like, I am not going to put up with this. We are not going to put up with this. And, that's how I've lived my life.
Yes, and it's so true. So I want everyone to understand, as we're going through this, that it's going to affect you in different ways. Like Iris became a huge advocate. You're not going to abuse her anymore. You're not going to get away with this. And I became just the opposite of just why bother? Because no, I'm never going to be believed. So why bother? And frankly, the retaliation. So that was something in my house. Anytime I tried to say something, the retaliation for trying to say something was so huge that then I just learned to not speak up. So, Iris, did you ever have retaliation because of trying to speak up and speak your truth?
Yes, I was told I was a liar. And for a long time, and that's why my psychic ability was really suppressed because anything that I said that I knew was true, I was told I was lying. So I still have that tape going on in my head, which I need to say, no, you're not a liar.
Right.
You are telling the truth.
Right. Absolutely. Same thing. I always found things like, oh, you only believe what you want to believe. Excuse me, I don't really want to believe. What are we talking about here? Because I don't want to believe that. But same thing. It really makes us not trust. And it was a huge hurdle to overcome when I was going down the psychic medium path because I had learned to not trust myself. So I couldn't trust my intuition or my clairvoyance or my claircognizance because I had been told for so long that it wasn't true. Now
And
let's,
when you think about that, like think about me and you being told that we're liars.
yeah,
Think about how that permeates your very soul and
yeah,
how you have to live with that because, and now it's like you don't know as a child that this is your perception of reality. And, you don't know these things, but you're living a path and walking a path because the people you love and you look for comfort and for support and for food and nurturance are telling you you're a liar.
Iris, and that is so true. And for a little kid, it makes you so confused about life in general because, and this is what I have noticed is the lack of trust for ourselves because we know something. I can remember as a little kid, just knowing that the way what was going on was wrong, just knowing it, but then being told that's not true, that's not happening in your house, you're lying. But I saw it. I felt it. I heard it. How can it not be true? And so it can make you actually feel, I don't know if you ever felt this, but there were times when I was a kid, I was actually feeling a little crazy that my memories, how do I have these memories in my head? How do I see something going on? And then people are telling me it's not true.
Well, it's interesting because you're a mutable sign. So you're a Pisces and you also have a mutable sign rising. I'm a fixed sign. I'm an Aquarian with Aries rising and Mars in Aries. So I went the other route. I became fixed. I am right. You are wrong. And so it made me more stubborn in ways I probably shouldn't have been stubborn, but it was my survival warrior mechanism. So everybody deals with it differently.
No, Iris, I love you brought that up. Okay, so now I want people to think about how, I mean, that was just a beautiful illustration of how it feeds over into our other lives and the rest of our lives. Okay, so me being mutable, going with the flow, right? Okay, whatever, backing off, just not saying anything because it's not going to do any good. that permeated most of my life, going with the flow, even when it wasn't for my higher and best good, not wanting to cause any waves. Iris, how she survived her childhood was very fixed. No, I'm going to be stubborn. And then she has probably had instances in her life where she was stubborn in areas where she shouldn't have been stubborn just because that was her survival mechanism.
Exactly.
So the way we deal with these things as kids is so fixed. It runs a program at an unconscious level and drives our behavior in a way that we don't even recognize. Now, Iris, let's talk a minute about healing through self-validation. We can really validate ourselves. For survivors who were dismissed or not believed, I just know how critical and crucial self-validation can be. How can someone validate their own experiences and emotions effectively when other people are saying, even as adults? I have known people that have been abused as kids and as adults will go back to their family and they'll readdress it. They'll be like, no, this really did happen. And again, they're not believed.
Yeah. I did that as an adult. I went back as an adult and said things. And again, I was told that never happened. Oh my God. How could you say that? I was there. You know,
Exactly.
I was there, right?
Yeah.
So I think, a lot of this probably for me happened as an adult. And that was one, naming the hurt. Okay. And recognizing that I'm not a liar, that it did happen and I was hurt. And then you've got to allow yourself grief. Okay. Now, a lot of my grief came back for me when my father passed away, where I was finally able to name the hurt and allow the grief to come in. And that was a process. It wasn't easy, but you really have to give yourself permission to grieve, and trust that you'll get support, which I did end up getting. I also want to say a big part for me was reconnecting with my truth, that yes, my memory was correct. And I had to separate the doubts from the truth because, you've been told so long what you're saying is not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
You know it's true, and really, I mean, it was easier for me because, as I said, I'm a warrior. I became a warrior for my cause. And then there's a couple of other things, and that is I had to validate my emotions. So
Yeah.
I had to name what I was feeling, accept the emotions that I suppressed. Now, you might say, well, you didn't suppress it because you were a warrior woman, right? But that was my way of suppressing the pain, was
Yeah.
to be a fighter. The more I was told I couldn't do something, the more I did it. I'm so contrarian. And then, and this again took a lot of practice for me, but I had to practice neutral observation in with my family and with people who triggered me and be able to not get emotional. And I want to say that's not something that happens overnight. It has taken me years and it's still a process I'm going through. And I want to talk about one of the ways I did this, and it was writing. I used to get up every morning and I used to call it vomit what was in my brain.
That,
And
yeah, journaling's so important.
and that really, really helped me. But for me, it was actually, I felt like I was vomiting, like I was just getting everything out. What about you, Christy?
That is the best way. Iris is the best way of journaling is to vomit on the page. That is the process, is to spew everything out. And I think Iris talked about some great points about validating our own emotions. When you're told growing up, you're a liar, that didn't happen, you you are making things up, and you have these memories in your head, it also makes you not, it makes you doubt your feelings. Because if you're doubting the memory, you're doubting the feelings associated with that memory. So we frequently don't even know our own bodies. We don't know what we are feeling. You know, I will, as I'm mentoring people or working with people processing trauma, I will say drop into their body. I don't know if you've ever had anyone say this to you, but they'll say, "What does that mean?" I'll say, "Well, really feel your body," and they honestly don't know how to drop into their body and feel it. So I have to start a process of, okay, wiggle your toes, move your ankle so they can really get in tune with your bodies. It becomes a disassociation thing. So I love what Ira said about validating your feelings. Another way is to, and we're going to go through the rest of this podcast really talking about ways to help yourself. Now, when we are giving you ideas, this is the way I teach psychic mediumship, help people through trauma is we try different things, but because everyone's individual, you have to find what works for you. So another way a lot of people will do it is they will find support groups, people who went through like things, people who can understand their emotions. It's you know, when you're wanting to heal that wound of betrayal and trust others, you want to really find like-minded people to build you that safety net. Because it's when you're slowly finding people that you can trust and building that safety net, it helps you rebuild trust in yourself, which in tune helps you build trust in others. With that being said, I do want to warn people that not everyone is worthy of your trust. And that is something I have found with people that I've worked with is you instantly want to jump into relationships. Oh, I'm working on building trust. I'm going to trust that person. No, part of trusting yourself is learning to trust your discernment. And not everyone is worthy of your trust. Now, Iris, how did you find rebuilding trust in others? How did that work in your life?
Well, it's interesting because again, I want to say everything is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So I don't know what I did first. If I started with self-trust. I probably started with self-trust because I was sure I was right. So I had to validate my own feelings. You know, many times children's feelings are validated by their parents. Well, mine really weren't, except if I was hungry. That was always validated. But other than that, or if I was crying about something, but this kind of stuff was too deep for my family.
Yeah.
So, and I had to, I think so. I started to trust myself. And then what I did is I started to identify safe people. Now, my safe people happened to be growing up my friends. I had a lot of friends and I have a lot of close friends, and I still have friends from first grade. I still have like all my high school friends were a very strong group. I'm friends with my college friends. So I started with my friends because I felt safe. And to this day, I still feel safe with them. I also feel that when you're identifying safe people, you have to look at their behavior over their words because people will try and sweet talk you, especially if you're going for help with an adult. And many times people don't get it. When your behavior doesn't match your words, it's a really important signal for you to get, hey, this doesn't feel right. You're saying you want to go, but you never take me with you. Like you want to do something, but we never get to do that. What is your behavior? The other thing I want to say is you've got to take it slowly, right? You've got
Yeah.
to build one friend at a time. And I would test the water. So I look for consistency. I think when I was younger, I used to test people, which I had a really hard time being vulnerable. Even to this day, I have a hard time being vulnerable. But I look to see, does this person follow through with what they say they're going to do? And that was really important for me with trust. And the other thing that I'm still having an issue, well, there's a couple things, but um, set and enforcing boundaries. I
Huge. Yes.
still, Christy, you've helped me so much with boundaries. If anyone needs help with boundaries, go to Christy's, because Christy really helped set me straight with boundaries with people, with boundaries with spirits, like how to set boundaries. And then, we haven't gotten here yet, but acknowledge and addressing triggers that come up, because sometimes someone will say something to you that you trust and it will trigger you. And you have to determine, is it them or is it me? Like I'm being triggered. It's not about them, but you really have to identify situation, behaviors, or words that make you feel unsafe. Oh,
Iris,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
I
No,
was
I was
going
going
to say
to say,
thank you for that. And Iris, I will tell you that she is like, if we can look at her friend group, I'm amazed at longevity of how many people she is friends with, and she built a group of people that she can trust. So I really have always admired that in her and her ability to build these beautiful relationships. Now, I do want to give people hope because a lot of people I meet do not have anyone in their life they can trust. Like Iris is really a dichotomy that she was able to build relationships she could trust when she was being taught not to trust herself. It's very unusual when people can do that because typically they recreate that same problem of attracting the people they can't trust. Now, when you're rebuilding trust, it is about finding, if you can't find someone, like let's just say you feel like all your friends have just sold you out, you can't find anyone, find a therapist. Find someone you can trust in that manner. You go to group therapy if you like. I know some people. Now, I didn't really agree with this. I was working with someone who was seeing a therapist, and this group therapist was this person was forcing my client to go to group therapy, which I had huge issues with because she was triggered. It's just my own personal belief. I don't think if you're being triggered to go to group therapy, because a lot of people, she didn't want to air her stuff in front of them because she hadn't built that trust with them yet. I don't think that you should really push yourself into doing something like that if you're not ready. If you're not firm enough in who you are. So try a single therapist, like one person that you're meeting with. If you feel comfortable in front of a group, go in front of a group. I know that I'm very particular. I have a group called the Divine Collective that we meet and we talk about a lot of personal things. And I keep a really locked down on that group. And I've had people leave because I will basically say, no, we must be kind. And so if you're going to go to a group, make sure it's locked down, like people are controlling who's in it.
and I want to say something. There was a certain point in my life where I had a dear friend who said to me, Iris, how much longer do we have to go through this? Right? Because I was uncovering, it was like an onion where I kept unpeeling more and more and more stuff.
Years.
But she supported me through it. I go, I don't know. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to. She goes, no, of course I'm going to be here for you. I just feel like it's so hard on you, but it was important for me.
Yes, and that's true. You have to peel back the layers. Now I want to roll into something that is near and dear to mine and Iris's heart. And I had to giggle. Y'all didn't even notice, but Iris has used a word that every time, because Iris and I have worked on something called the process for like a year and a half now, 2 years. It's been a long time. Fine tuning a system to help people release triggers. And so every time she has said the process in this recording, I've kind of laughed because that's what we called it, is the process.
Have I said the process?
Yes, you have. You weren't referring to our process, but you were saying the process of I was like, oh my goodness, I love that. Um, so Iris and I, another now this when we talk about when I'm about to talk about tools in your toolbox. Okay, so what are your tools in your toolbox? You have some journaling that we've talked about. We're talking about learning to validate yourself. We've talked about finding a therapist or a group if that works for you. We are all talking about tools in your toolbox. No one is going to be able to find, well, I guess you could, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find one thing that will help you peel back all the layers and get rid of all your woes. It's a long process and it's a long journey, but I want to tell you right now that Iris and I are so proud of each and every one of you who takes that first step. Now, Iris and I have a business called Awakening Your Path. We wrote a book, which will be at the publisher soon. And we have a website and we have Facebook, all the social media trappings. And it's the business, it's called Awakening Your Path. But it's developed around something we name called the process. Now, we're not going to go into the process in depth here. Again, we will do another follow on and we will actually take people through the process on a follow on podcast. But the process is a series of questions to help you identify and release emotional triggers. Okay, what's a trigger? If you want to tell them, Iris, you don't need to.
Sure. No, I can tell them, but I want to say something about the book. It's more than a book, it's a guide to self-awareness.
It really is.
I've been through probably about, I don't know, 18 or 19 years of therapy. And in comparison, this has released things so much faster.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying talk therapy is not good, because who knows if I would be in the place I am today if I hadn't gone to talk therapy. I also went to groups. And I want to say in the beginning, whenever I went to a group, I would be quiet. And then when I would get mad is when I would talk. But, going to a group and just sitting there is also good, even if you don't share, because you're seeing that you're not alone. So getting back to awakening your path.
You don't mind for Iris, just a second. I want to add to that. I'm sorry, Iris. But when she was talking about the process, I know this is not about our book, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit because Iris kind of hinted at it. It is, no, talk therapy is great, but what talk therapy does is it keeps your problem in the active part of your brain. It keeps it in the forefront. It keeps you thinking about it, which all of it has its place. It's a part of your toolbox. The process, and I've done a lot of training, like hypnotherapy, all kinds like tapping, brain spotting. I've had training in a lot of these different areas. And the process is more in line with those because the process takes an active memory that is triggering, and Iris is about to explain to you what a trigger is, and it helps you store it in your brain in the proper spot. When you have a memory that is stored in the wrong spot and becomes a trigger, it has control of you. When you can use the process or brain spotting or tapping or something to get this memory from your fight or flight spot to your memory bank where normal memories are stored, it allows you to evaluate it from a point of neutrality. Okay, Iris, what is a trigger? Let us have it.
So a trigger is an emotional reaction that feels disproportionate to the present moment. So let me give you an example. You're at a fireworks display and someone's having a meltdown, and that person served in the front lines on the military. So that person gets triggered by that sound. You were dating someone and all of a sudden you smell the same scent that they wore, and you get triggered with all the pain that happened there. So there are internal triggers, which are these stem from memories or emotions that arise from within. And then there's external triggers, and they originate from the outside world, such as people, places, and things. But all of it initiates internally because every reaction we have, what Christy was talking about was the amygdala. It's our emotional alarm system. It takes over and it puts us in a fight or flight mode where all of a sudden we feel like we are being threatened. Now, some of these instances, you're like, I don't know why. My boss just told me I did a shitty job and I'm at my desk crying. It didn't come from your boss telling you you did a bad job. It comes from years of being told that you're not doing a good job. And we help you get to the source of these issues. So you're dealing with the original hurt and not all these other hurts that have come, that have happened afterwards.
Yes. I don't want people to think that, and I know a lot of people think, oh, the amygdala, it's fight or flight. It takes you out, it puts you into a sympathetic state, takes you out of your parasympathetic state, which is where parasympathetic state nervous system is where you're in a resting. And it has a bad name, but I want everyone to understand that the amygdala has done its job. Its job is to keep you safe. If the last time you smelled that one cologne, you were assaulted, that cologne is stored as danger. It doesn't matter if it's this kindest, gentlest person in the world wearing it. No, your amygdala has stored that smell, danger. So you're going to be triggered by this very sweet person and you have no idea why.
And triggers actually hijack our brains, right? Because they take over, they activate this fight or flight. So they change everything about the way you're feeling. And you're like, why do I feel like I'm in combat? Like all of a sudden I was having a great day and now I want to kill someone, I'm
Absolutely. And it really affects our ability to show up in the world the way we want to. Let's just say you're in a meeting and you have this huge presentation that you prepared for. Someone comes in, and I'm going to use this example again, wearing that cologne that triggers you. You now are you're fighting your fight or flight. You're not being present and you're not being effective for this beautiful presentation you worked on. Or, you're not being present for your children in a way you want them to because you're dealing with this fight or flight. Now, the issue is when you have had a traumatic childhood and you were not believed, you're going to have more triggers than the average person. So you feel like you're being triggered all the time. Mm-hmm. So that's when Iris was talking earlier about peeling back the layers. Because once you take care of one trigger, then you discover another one. But with each beautiful layer that you pull back, you get closer to your authentic self, who you really want to be.
And this is where the process shines because it's not about avoiding triggers, because that's impossible. The process helps us confront our emotional triggers safely and transform their relationships with different reactions, right? So if you don't react the same, it's like you're changing the dance you used to do. So if every time, say, you smelled this certain cologne of this person you dated, you went into you got very angry with all the people around you. And all of a sudden you smell the cologne and you're not angry. You're doing a different dance than you were before. But the trigger hasn't gone away. You have just learned at its core where it comes from and how to release it.
Now, I want everyone we've talked a lot about this process. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and then we're going to move on to some other areas. So let's recap so far where we've been, some ways you can do to help yourself build trust, acknowledging your pain, journaling, slowly building trust in others. Iris gave a good point. When you're building trust in others, listen, watch their behavior and their words. They have to match for you to be able to trust them. Not everyone is trustworthy. You can find a therapist, find a support group you trust, but just make sure the support group, whoever is running the support group, you trust that person and they're going to keep it on lockdown when it comes to how people are treated in it. Now, Iris and I are talking about you cannot always, I want you to envision yourself in front of that meeting, made this huge presentation, and you're being triggered. You don't have time to stop right there, put the meeting on hold and say, just a minute, let me go journal. Just a minute, let me go find my counselor. Just a minute, let me phone a friend. You have to have something that you can use right there. That's why Iris and I developed this process, because it's a series of questions. And once you learn these questions, you can't do it maybe the first time really quickly, but once you run this process a few times, you can do it very quickly. You can do it.
I've got it down to 5 minutes. I've got it down to 5. It takes me 5 minutes or less to release a trigger where I'm like, okay, I'm fine.
And something else I've noticed about the process, Iris, is okay, let's just say I'm triggered. I don't have time. I'm in the conversation with someone. I can't even step away for 5 minutes. So I don't have time to run the process right then. But what it has allowed me to do is recognize that I'm being triggered more quickly. And it allows me, once the recognition is there, and I have developed a thing with my body. It's like, oh, I recognize I'm being triggered. I'm going to give myself 15 minutes and then I will deal with this. So then I can step away in 15 minutes. But once you acknowledge the process, or at least this has worked this way for me, I acknowledge, oh, I'm being triggered. You know what, trigger? Step to the side for just a moment. Let me compartmentalize it for just a moment. Let me get through this moment that I'm in talking to this person. Step aside. I have now those 4 minutes it takes to run the process. In the beginning, of course, it takes longer to run the process until you get used to it.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, because I was going to say, when I start, for me, it's like I get angry. And the minute I feel my blood starting to boil, where I can't focus, I do this. And if I am with people, I'm like, okay, Iris, you're being triggered. And I think, okay, calm down. And can I get to the bathroom for 5 minutes to release this trigger away from everyone else? Or can I take a 3-minute break just to say, okay, where is it? What is it? And help me release it. So it's a real time kind of mechanism that you can use just to help you function normally. And when I say normally, whatever's normal for you,
Absolutely, yeah. Because even though Iris and I are very good friends, we work well together, my normal and her normal are two different things.
Yeah.
Also, I want to acknowledge that there may be some people watching this, and I just want to tell you what I'm about to say are my favorite people. The ones who are saying, I don't have any triggers. Those are my favorite people. Come to me, because we have had people say that before. Everyone has triggers. Now, if you say you don't have a trigger, you have gotten really good at tapping down your emotions and not reacting to them. Tapping down your emotions and not reacting to them is completely different than fully processing and releasing that emotion. So now I want us to talk a little bit. I'm sorry, Iris and I can get going on the process. We are just so passionate about it. We truly love it. We will be kicking off some group events, and the book will be out next year, hopefully pretty early in the year. And but before that, we'll be kicking off some group events and some things where you can come and see us in person talking about it. But now we're going to talk a little bit about creating a safe place for healing. How important is it for survivors to establish a sense of safety for their physical and emotional environment when they're embarking on it? Yeah, I know, right?
It is crucial. Did you notice I was saying I need to go to the bathroom, pull myself out of the situation for a moment? What I was doing was creating a safe space for myself,
Yeah.
right? So it is crucial. I mean, the things it does for you is it regulates your nervous system, because when you've had trauma, if you're a survivor of any kind of trauma as a child, you have like your nervous system is not regulated like everyone else. You could be hyper vigilant, which is what I am. I always say I walk into a room and I've got my thermometer up everyone's bum. I can tell you how everyone in the room is feeling because I had to know what was going on in my household before things blew up. So, like, so I could get out of there, right? So I could get out. So you become hyper vigilant. It also helps you build trust with yourself and with others, which I think is really important when you're creating a safe space. Like, I know I can trust myself. And sometimes I might need to call someone and say, hey, I might call Christy and say, hey, I'm really triggered. I'm having a hard time working this out. Can you walk it through with me? Right.
Yeah.
Also, when you create a safe space for yourself, you're taking your healing into your own hands, and it prevents you from being re-traumatized again. Now, think about it. If you feel you shouldn't get into a car with someone, don't get into that car, right? You need to, bless you. You
Thank you. I
need
just sneezed for those of you who are watching and listening.
you need to constantly think about and be hyper vigilant about where you are putting yourself. If you're like, I'm just saying, if you were sexually attacked in a bar when you went by yourself and you start going to bars again by yourself, you could be re-traumatized. Maybe you go with a friend or you go with a group of friends. You're not left alone. So you have to recreate. It also helps you be more open and vulnerable, because when you are a survivor, it's hard for you to really be vulnerable in a way that people who haven't been, traumatized are.
Yes, and I want Iris, because I think she grew up in the same kind of household as well. It was different but the same, if that makes sense. And when she's talking about being vulnerable, you could not be vulnerable in my house growing up, because if you showed weakness, it was going to be taken advantage of. So it's really hard to be able to let yourself relax into that. So it's so important to find a place where you feel safe emotionally and physically. Find a therapist or a friend, somewhere where you can be okay. And it's also during healing is when you're safe. So your parasympathetic nervous system is your healing state. Your sympathetic nervous system is what kicks in whenever you are triggered. If your sympathetic nervous system is constantly on high alert and you are never relaxing, your body is not getting into that good healing state. And eventually, some of these emotional issues can then manifest themselves physically. I'm not saying they will for everyone, but I have seen it happen. Now, I know Iris talked about it a little bit earlier. She mentioned it briefly. We're going to go into a little bit more depth now, talking about forgiveness and boundaries. Forgiveness and setting up boundaries is so important. So let's just talk about forgiveness real quick, Iris. And when I say forgiveness, these words are so true. When I say forgiveness is for yourself, not for others.
I agree with you. And it's interesting because I have been a person, it's been very hard for me to forgive people and forgive the people who have done me harm. And I have learned over time that I need to forgive those people for me. I mean, it's good for them, but it's also good for me for several reasons. When you're angry at someone, you're chained to them spiritually, basically,
You are.
and they are in your aura field. So by continuing to be angry with them and not forgiving them, you've got them very close to you. The moment you forgive them, you've released them, and it opens up your world in a big way. Now, I think the first forgiveness we have to do, and you talked a little bit about this, is forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Mhm.
it's self forgiveness, because when you abused, you didn't wish for it, you didn't put yourself, like, it's not like you asked for that abuse, and many times we carry that shame with us and that blame with us and that identity with us. And the first thing I needed to do was to forgive myself, right? And to forgive everything that happened before it. But then with forgiving others, you can forgive them for yourself. And I had to come to the conclusion that there are no winners or losers. I've always been very involved with winning. And for me, I had to come to the conclusion that forgiveness is not a winning and losing battle. It's it's for you to clean your aura field, to clean your space, to move on, to unattach those people to you.
Yeah. There, yes, yes, yes. And I know when I talk to people about forgiving, but do you know what they did? They need that. We're not saying forget what they did. We're saying that when you ruminate on what they did to you, it creates a negative emotion in your head, which then can manifest itself physically within your body. You're doing it for yourself. Also, if you're in a position where you can get justice for yourself, forgiveness is completely different than justice. Revenge is different than justice. We're talking about taking your reactions to incidences to a higher octave, to a higher vibration. So think about that. Forgiveness and unforgiveness. Forgiveness is going to be a higher vibration, a higher octave, but it doesn't mean forget what they did to you. Revenge is it's the energy behind what you're doing. Whenever I'm mentoring people or I have friends and they say that call me and ask my opinion on a course of action, I always ask, what's your purpose? What's your purpose behind that? If your purpose is justice, by all means. If your purpose is revenge, that's not the kind of energy you want to get into.
Because it keeps you locked in with them,
Yes,
because you're still engaging. And if you really want to move on, forgiveness, and you're right, it doesn't mean you forget, because after forgiveness, you need to decide on what your boundaries are, right? Like, what kind of boundaries are you going to have? And it's a hard scale to maneuver, but forgiveness doesn't mean that you have forgotten. And I'm so glad that you say that, because somebody shows you who they are, you need to listen. But that doesn't mean that you need to carry the anger of what happened with you, because whatever happened was there for you to learn a lesson. I'm sorry to say.
right. Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Now, can people change? Absolutely, they can, but they need to prove it. And the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior.
Yes.
People can change, but they need to prove it.
Now, I want to say that I have forgiven my father. He's in spirit, and I talk to him all the time in spirit. But if I were to see him today, I would be fine talking to him.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that was a big road, like a big road for me to overcome, like to drive down, to forgive him.
It was huge. Now let's talk a little bit. We're going to close it up with talking about some boundaries. And there's a couple things I want to say is that someone's relationship title in your life does not give them the license to treat you any way they want. What does that mean? Mom, dad, brother, sister, partner, I don't care what their relationship title is, there are still needs to be a level of behavior, of respect for you. If you have put up boundaries, if you have, every time you go to your mom's house, she is talking about things that you asked her not to. That happened with my mother. every time. And I finally told her one time, the next time you bring this up, she was talking very badly about someone else. And I said, the next time you talk badly about that person, I'm done. I'm done talking to you. I'd already warned her. She kept doing it. She did it again. I cut off communication. That was extreme and that was years in the making. So I'm not saying the first time someone pushes your boundaries to cut them off, but you need to keep your boundaries in mind and be diligent about enforcing them. And I will promise you that if you've never put up a boundary with someone and you start putting a boundary up, they're going to push back hard. So I want you to be prepared. Just like with my mother, I had never been that hardcore about putting up a boundary. So she didn't believe me. She just kept pushing and pushing until like, okay, well, we have to be done here. Um, I'm the same way when it comes to anyone. You just ask Iris. I am sometimes almost too good at putting up boundaries. It's because I've learned to protect my peace with everything I have. My peace was so hard to come by that when I see someone making waves in my pool, waves that I don't want there, I will put up a boundary. It just was so hard to come by my peace, so hard for me to find it. You have to protect it at all costs.
Hmm.
So what's been your experience with boundaries, Iris?
Well, you've taught me a lot about boundaries. I don't think I had boundaries. I mean, I had boundaries, but not boundaries like I do now with people who are close to me. I had boundaries with people who weren't close, but people who were close, I have to say, I've learned a lot from Christy. And I think the thing I needed to do was identify my needs and limits.
Yeah,
Once someone shows you who they are, it's like, what do I need? And what am I willing to participate in? And where am I willing, like, like, the focus is on me. And I want to say it's not easy for me. I am a person who has a hard time with boundaries. There's certain things that suck me right in. And I have to almost have I made a list actually, it flashes in my mind of things that are unacceptable when people try to cross my boundaries. So now sometimes, like if someone's trying to cross my boundaries, I'll see a flashing light, of okay, Iris, now's your opportunity to practice boundary control. And it's hard because many times say, I want to refuse something. I want to lie. I want to give them an excuse instead of saying, I'm not able to make it. You don't have to give a reason. Like you were saying before, you feel like you always have to give a reason. I think it's because of our upbringings,
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so it's something for me that's a work in progress to have boundaries with people that I have forgiven and they have forgiven me. It's and even with people who are new coming into my life until people have proven themselves. And when I'm not saying proven, but proven to me that I can trust them, right?
Absolutely. I think there is different levels to relationships. You have to prove that they're trustworthy.
Right.
Show. How do you like
And
that? Do you like that better? Show. Show they're trustworthy.
yeah, show they're trustworthy. And I have to look at boundaries as an act of self-love because that is the
Mhm.
only way I can set them. It's like, okay, and I always say, what does baby Iris need? Like, what does baby Iris need to feel safe? Because I have to break it down to that level because adult Iris is, a warrior.
Absolutely. Thank you, Iris, for being here today. I want to thank everyone, and we're going to recap real quick. Not being believed caused you to not trust yourself. This is the down and dirty of it. Make sure you're validating. You can validate through journaling. You have to, acknowledging your pain is a huge component of this. Building trust in others by going slow. And Iris was just talking about this, putting up boundaries and having people's behaviors and words match is a great way for them to show that they're worthy of your trust. Find someone you can trust to talk to. Iris built some friends around her. That she has a great group of friends. You can find a therapist, find a group of people. find some tools in your toolbox. What are those tools in your toolbox? They can be journaling, they can be mind spotting, they can be the process. And be look on the lookout for that. Iris and I will be putting out a lot more information about the process, how to utilize it, how to bring it into your life, just to put you on that path to a more enlightened you. The book and the other websites that you can find us on are Awaken Your Path. That's the name of the website. That's the name of all the social media. And of course, you can find Iris on her own personal astrology through Iris Libby and me, Krista Godwin, on my psychic mediums. Um, Now, I want to thank everyone who took the time out of their day to join us, to really partner with Iris and I on this path to peeling back those layers and becoming a more authentic you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thank
Kristen.
you.
Thank you, everyone.